the first 10 years of hip hop, again, wasn't hip hop, so to speak. And what I mean by that is it was this thing that was just happening in the Bronx organically that they had no name for, right? They had no name for it, and it was just creativity, like a renaissance taking place. When it became hip hop, wasn't in the 70s. The term,
80,
right,
81,
exactly. That's when the term started to be used. You know, a lot of people, when they say the first hip hop party was August 11th, 1973 on 1520 Cedric Avenue, and Kool Herc was the DJ. Sometimes I'm like, if you sit down and just think about it, does it make sense that like at this party, there was just this big bang and like, that was the first time everyone started breaking, and that day graffiti started, and that day, no, it was, you had parties already happening in the Bronx through, let's say 1977, right? But here's the thing, up until 1977, only a few select people had the equipment. DJing was a very exclusive thing that, you know, you only did in clubs if you were Grandmaster Flowers, Pete DJ Jones, or Hollywood. But those were even more of a like small exclusive group of DJs that were actually in nightclubs, right? Then you had the Hercs, the Bams, the Flashes that couldn't get in those nightclubs. So what they did was they were like, all right, if I can't get in any of these nightclubs, I'm going to throw parties in abandoned apartments inside burned down buildings. I'm going to throw parties in the park. Talk about resourcefulness. Like, the black man is the most resourceful man on this planet. You give him anything, he's going to figure out a way to turn it into something, right? So you had...
Even the park jams, we plugged into the light post.
Right, exactly.
It's like,
literally.
we risked
our lives. Right, exactly. But they were resourceful, right? But then here's what happened. 1977, July, there was the blackout, right?
I remember that.
And I remember I was outside playing two-hand touch football when the lights went out.
I was inside watching the Western with my pop.
You were watching TV. You were watching TV. I remember I was outside playing two-hand touch football, right? Hot night, right? In July. But here's the thing that happened. In the Bronx, the people that were going to the park jams, people meaning young kids, 14, 15, 16 years old, that were going to the park jams, watching Herc, Bam, Jazzy Jay, now can loot Crazy Eddie, the Wiz, right? Whatever, right? And they would, so what they did was they were like, all right, on some Robin Hood shit. Yeah, right. It happened in Queens, it happened in Brooklyn. But the reason I isolate the Bronx is because that is the place that we all kind of like recognize as being the hub for like, right? So these kids went in these stores that night and ran out with amps, speakers, turntables. So now that was like a benchmark moment, because after that, more people started doing it and it started spreading even more, right? So when you factor in then that already the Bronx was burning, you had slumlords burning down their buildings. What was happening in the Bronx was two things. Number one, here in New York City, you have people, let's just say, that run things in each borough, right? Housing. And in the Bronx, Cross Bronx Expressway was built. White flight took place. Irish, Jewish, Italian were fleeing the Bronx. The second part of the equation is that there was a policy of benign neglect. This was a policy that President Nixon actually implemented. And basically what it means is we couldn't gentrify the Bronx. All right, well, just ignore it. Like, let whatever happened in the Bronx happen. And that's why you have, like, when you look at pictures of the Bronx, you see rubble, burnt buildings. They were trying to gentrify the Bronx. They were trying to make it what Brooklyn is now. Factor on top of that redlining, housing department pulls out a map and they take a red marker and they're literally like, all right, this section of the Bronx, a lot of black people. All right, we're going to mark that as undesirable to live. This section of Queens, a lot of white people. Okay, we'll mark that as desirable to live. And literally they would take a red marker, draw borders and classify which neighborhoods were going to get funding, My point that I'm trying to make is that when you factor in all of these different circumstances, and then you have the blackout, which happened because these lightning bolts that like hit, I don't know, somewhere like in Westchester, our city was so underfunded, our infrastructure could not take that, right? After that, you had now all these kids with mics and turntables and amplifiers, right? Systems. So it just grew from there. It grew from there, and now the media is coming into the Bronx documenting these fires, but while they're documenting these fires and this rubble and poverty, they're seeing a group of kids breaking on cardboard.
So trying to show it's okay. They're still having fun.
Well, you know what? Maybe, but I think the point that I'm trying to make is that earlier I was saying the first 10 years of hip hop wasn't hip hop. Yeah. It was just this thing that was happening, right? With regards to breaking, rhyming, DJing, graffiti. But when the media started to come in and document it, because media was going to the Bronx because these buildings were burning. But in ending up in the Bronx, they're seeing these kids breaking or hearing music from a park and pulling up and being like, yo, what's this? Like, I came to document a fire, but what's this other crazy shit that these kids are into over here? So then you started seeing it in the news. When that happened, the rest of the tri-state area started to learn about it. Then, you know, you had cats like Fab Five Freddy that were schmoozing with like artsy punk rock dudes in the Lower East Side, right?
Fab Five was a graffiti.
And he was a graffiti artist, and people like him were responsible for telling these hipsters down here in the LES, yo, come up with me to the Bronx and see what's going on up there. So then you're bringing these rich white folk, right? That maybe own clubs that can curate shows at museums, art museums, up to the Bronx. Oh, what's this? And you know how people with money are. When they see something that's creative, the first thing they think is, how can I monetize it? Right. And so in the early 80s, that's what was happening, was dudes like Fab Five Freddy were bridging the culture of money with the culture of what was happening in the Bronx, which wasn't even called hip hop. It was just this thing. Now, if you have money and you're trying to package this thing, what are you gonna call it? And dudes like Bam and Fab came up with this term, hip hop. And you have these four elements: breaking, DJing, rapping, graffiti. This is what it looks like.
Did they say why?
It's a lot of different stories. For one, hip hop was a term that was very popular amongst the MCs to the hip hop. Well, here's the thing. From what I know from seeing interviews with Grandmaster Caz, peace to Grandmaster Caz, hip hop was more of a military reference. Hip hop, 2, 3, 4, like kind of cadence. I think a friend of theirs in the Bronx was gonna go to the army or enlisted into the army or whatever, and they would make fun of him and just do that 1, 2, 3, 4, hip hop, whatever. So that's kind of where it kind of grew. And then MC started using it in their freestyles until the hip hop, hip hop. You don't stop, right? So it's like when you listen to Rappers Delight, the first word is to the hip hop, right? So it's like naturally when you think about it, that just seems to be the word that like just stood out. Right. And that was the word that they decided they were going to use to categorize this thing that has now turned into this billion-dollar industry. But to wrap my point up, all I want to say is that when this thing started, it wasn't even like, there was no intent for it to be this 50 long year run. It was just this thing that was happening. And then companies came, monetized it. We're going to make movies, music videos, records, and the people that created it lost control.
It's ownership. And when you own your platform and your IP, your consumers or what have you, you can say what you want and you're not impacted by the trends. Because when you stay true to yourself, you're going to be in whatever that is, right? Because people will gravitate, but you just do what you're doing and perfect your craft too. That's what a lot of people are not doing today. They want to jump on and maximize off of the hot thing without doing the homework. It's like what you don't see, you know?
DJs like myself are a great example of that. You know, I don't have a manager. I don't have a booking agent, but my platform is big enough to where I could say this kind of shit and not worry about getting blackballed, because guess what? I'm not bound to like anyone else's platform. I have my own platform, Brolic Army. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, I'm not bound to any platform, so I could say whatever the fuck I want to say.
Right.
And you got to live with that shit. But my thing is I am responsible with my content. It's not like I'm saying anything that isn't true.